Continuing with our discussion on process elementals, we will take a look at generic operational elementals in this session. We started off by saying the elementals in heat model can be divided into three categories: structural elementals, process elementals, and freedom elementals. And the process elemental category can be further divided into motivational elementals, generic operational elementals, faculty, characteristic, resultant, and accumulative. We saw motivational elementals last time. Now we will see generic operational elementals. These are some of the generic operational elementals. What are the generic operational elementals? As the name suggests, these are operational elementals as the process happens from activation of desire to action to the result of that action. We can see the entire sequence of events from activation of desire to, if you look at any psychological event from starting to the end, the starting of the event is activation of any desire, and the end of any event is the resultant phase. The resultant elemental phase ultimately creates templates for future. So this is the whole sequence of any event. If you look, it stretches out from desire to resultant elemental phase. So it's from desire to a template for future. That is how the psychological event stretches out from desire at one end to template for future on the other hand. And in between are the phases. So you have desire, activation of desire, then the psychological process which prepares the cognitive apparatus to get involved into it, then the working of the cognitive apparatus, then action, and then the result of that action, be it satisfaction, dissatisfaction, anger, fear, pain, whatever be the outcome of that event, and then based upon it, future templates. So the variables which are involved in this journey from desire at one hand to template for the future on the other, and the whole process in between, they are termed as generic operational elements. So you have desire and then affinity. So the process is understood here in a way that there is a desire and the desire is activated. The desire, whatever it is located in some chakra and is activated. It may be just one desire or multiplicity of desires simultaneously, or two desires can create a third one. Whatever be the situation, desire is activated. How the desire is activated, on that there is a table in HEAT called activation of desire. That how does desire get activated and what is the strength of this desire? What are the factors determining activation of desire and the strength of activation of desire? For that there is a list of variables which determine activation of desire and strength of activation of desire. That we have done in generic affect system of HEAT. Another presentation, it would be, I think the video is there on YouTube already. Generic affect system of how a desire is activated and how the strength of that activation of desire is determined. Then there is a new variable called affinity. This is a new variable that I have coined. And this is like pure magnetic force in terms of the life energy dynamics. So affinity is a variable, not only a variable in a metaphorical sense. I believe it is a substance, not in the substantial sense of the term, in the physical sense of the term, but in a subtle sense of the term. It is deposited on the chakra. For example, if the power elemental is triggered very deeply, the amount of affinity which will be deposited on the Manipur chakra will be very high compared to if power desire was triggered very lightly, in which low amount of affinity will be deposited. And there seems to be a stock of affinity which gets distributed over the chakras in different ways. And some of the affinity lies in a potential condition, latent condition, and some is in free floating condition. Same for another variable called life energy, or prana as we call it in the East, or libido as Freud roughly calls it. Jung of course uses life energy as it is. So this prana or life energy again is partly in potential form and partly in free flowing form, and the affinity is like the magnetic force which draws towards itself life energy, almost as though life energy was the iron and the affinity was the magnet. So the life energy goes towards the affinity. So there is some mechanism through which it happens. What it is, we don't know. But affinity is a variable, or affinity is that entity which gets deposited on the chakra in which some desire is being activated. And the quantum of affinity is based upon the intensity of the desire. Life energy, as we saw, this is the energy which flows in the organism, which comes partly from the food we eat and partly from universal nature. Food as a source is easy to accept in a secular way, in an empirical way. The other part goes into belief. Those who are into pranic healing, Reiki, they find it very easy to believe. But those who are not into energy healing, they find it unscientific to believe that prana can be acquired except from any other source other than food. If you don't believe, just put it aside. Use this model as much as it allows itself to be congruent to your beliefs. This, of course, total life energy is partly potential and partly free. Then there is a very important variable of sensitivity. This is at the root of most psychosomatic problems. If sensitivity was not high, there are two issues at the center of any psychological problem: sensitivity and negativity. Or you can say sensitivity and positivity. Lack of positivity is negativity. Sensitivity determines how much affect will be generated per unit of stimulus. And if the sensitivity is high, obviously for the same event, you will generate far more affect than somebody with a low sensitivity. And if sensitivity is at the service of positive effects, you will be more happy. There's nothing to worry. In fact, you are lucky. But if sensitivity combines with negativity, so any sort of catastrophic thinking, then it creates problem, because then you have a huge quantum of negative effect generated, and in most cases the regulatory system cannot regulate that amount of negative effect, and the unregulated effect then spills over to create symptoms, psychological symptoms or psychosomatic sicknesses. Sensitivity is therefore a very important generic operational elemental. Then we go into how affect is created. So there are variables related to it. First is sensitivity. So if you look at this part, sensitivity to symptoms, this is actually a repetition of generic affect system which we have done before, but we'll do it again. So this is a very important variable, the affect stimulus strength. If the strength of the stimulating variable from outside is very high, obviously more likely that you are generating more affect. The nature of the stimulus is also important, not only the intensity. Affect generated is an important variable. That after all these three, not only all these three, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, from desire till stimulus nature, all of this will impact how much affect is generated. But affect generated itself is a very important variable. Out of the generated affect, part will be expressed. If all of this is expressed, there won't be any pathology. But generally only a part is expressed. Another part is regulated. If you successfully regulate, again no pathology. If it cannot be regulated in some good way, the last regulatory mechanism is repression. And if you have containing capacity to contain what is repressed, again you may feel listless, you will have less energy, you might not feel very enthusiastic, very playful, but you won't have other serious difficulties because the affect is contained. If containing capacity is not enough and these mechanisms, expression, regulation, repression fail, affect cannot be contained, the excess pathological affect then goes into symptoms, which may be psychological problems or psychosomatic sicknesses. And then the psychological defenses we talk about, all of these, they constitute the generic operational elementals. As we go developing the model, this is an area where highest number of new additions are likely to be made. So this list will enhance and more variables will be identified and added to this list. So this constitutes the generic operational, the list of generic operational elementals. How they operate in a phenomena, in creating pathology, how you can use them for healing, that we'll get into later. For example, let us say a person is suffering from paranoia and we do case history of the person and we realize the person has a split open. So the cause of paranoia is less likely to be repressed homosexuality, as Freud said, but the case seems to be that it is owing to the open split. And if that is the situation, how do we see the affect being generated? And if we come there to the point that it is not the affect generation but the affect regulation which is a problem, then we can focus on this affect regulation. We may see that in similar situation many others are not having the same problems, and therefore the problem here is not of generation but of regulation. And we see regulatory mechanisms not working well. So whatever we see in the case, on that we can focus, and if the diagnosis is correct in elemental terms, we should get lasting, quicker results. That is the way we can use this whole idea of elementals to understand in more elemental, exact and accurate terms pathogenesis and the healing plan. Thank you.